So during our whole journey to write this book, could you maybe let us know what was one of the worst examples, and also one of the most inspiring ones of climate adaptation that you have come across?
Yeah, yeah. There's kind of quirky ones as well, which are really interesting. So the one which really struck me was in the Alps in France. All the ski resorts which are in the Alps, like hundreds of them have closed down, which I didn't realize. I didn't realize how many there used to be, but lots and lots of ski resorts have had to close because they don't get enough snow in the winter anymore. And there's other ones which are kind of clinging on for dear life and trying to keep going despite the lack of snow. And I'll probably get the pronunciation wrong, but it's in Luchon-sur-Wagnes, which is in the Alps. It's probably a completely terrible pronouncement, so apologies to any French speakers. It's the ski resort there is on the kind of lower slopes of the mountain, and it wasn't getting enough snow, and so the town's mayor decided to commission helicopters to fly up the mountain, scoop up snow into massive bags, and then bring that snow down to the lower slopes and dump it on the slopes so that the skiing could continue. And so and he sort of said, well, this is a one-off because this is extremely honest. Like, well, it's not going to be a one-off because this isn't going to change. And so that was one which shocked me. And then, that's part of the wider story around ski resorts of creating fake snow. So they have these snow making machines which use huge amounts of fossil fuels to actually be powered. They're kind of diesel generated things, and they could basically take in water, freeze it, and then spray it onto the slopes. And that sort of started in New York, I think, in the 1960s. But now, like, ski resorts all over the world have these snow machines which are kind of spraying all this snow. And what it does, which is interesting side of the adaptation story, is that it kind of creates a bit of a fake reality. It's kind of for the people who go and visit those ski resorts. If they don't get up early enough in the morning to see these sprayers going off, or don't really take notice of them, it's kind of like, oh, well, the climate hasn't changed because the snow's still here. It's kind of a form of denial in that sense. It's like, well, we'll adapt by spraying snow and kind of keeping the ski resort alive, and it can kind of delay the need for climate action because it doesn't seem as extreme to people if the snow is still there, or if there is a way of kind of working around the problem of there being no snow by spraying snow. So it kind of can have that kind of delaying denialist kind of effect as well with adaptation. I even saw that in Moscow, in Red Square at Christmas time, they're now putting fake snow in it to make it look like a winter wonderland, and that's kind of happening as well, which is crazy. And then in terms of like the better, more positive examples, so it's kind of looking for ways in which, for me, it's ways in which adaptation is part of a broader strategy of kind of transforming the kind of the social and economic conditions which are creating climate change in the first place. So we live in a certain economic system and a certain social system and political system which continues to generate environmental problems, and climate change being the kind of one of the key ones. And so if you have adaptation which is kind of trying to protect that existing structure, then it is that sort of denialist thing, that's the kind of spraying of the snow. But if you have adaptation which is part of a broader transformative agenda which is trying to address issues of economic inequality, gender equality, racial inequality, and so on, then those are the really inspiring ones that are happening, because they're actually trying to, the adaptation is just a part of a broader transformative process. So I think probably the most exciting thing I think is happening at the moment is what's happening in Rojava in northern Syria, in the Kurdish part of northern Syria, or the Syrian part of Kurdistan, depending on your perspective. So in Rojava, in the fallout from obviously the horrendous civil war that's happening there, and the kind of political vacuum which it created, the people of Rojava kind of went on a, I guess, kind of rebuilding mission and a transformative mission around, right, we want to run this society differently. We want to run it along with feminist principles and with ecological principles, with equality. We want to decentralize decision making. We want to have more citizen assemblies, so on. We want to live in harmony with the environment as much as we can. I mean, and it's as much as they can while also fighting a war. So there is obviously, they have like that going on, but they're also, in spite of that, they're also still able to have this incredible kind of movement towards a more socially just and ecologically mindful and sustainable society. And within that, there'll be adaptations to climate change going on within all that, in terms of how they're kind of keeping their homes cool and what crops they're growing and how they're kind of creating more diverse range of crops and not having monocultures, which is what was kind of enforced in them before. So having, it's a way of being more resilient to climate change is to have a bigger variety of crops that can cope with the different weathers and so on. So I think the Make Rojava Green movement, I think, is one of the most inspiring things which I've come across in recent years, and really kind of, and actually inspired me a little bit to write this book. So it's the book that they created is printed by the same printers we're going to use for Great Adaptations, and which have a great workers cooperative here in London. So that one, but I think, and then I've been inspired massively by what I have encountered firsthand in Nepal as well, which is a real agroforestry based approach, which is again has that really systems thinking element to it. It's about health, it's about gender, it's about how can we improve, how can we adapt to climate change in ways which also enable us to develop as a society. And so that's been really inspiring, seeing how they're growing, testing out, because it's obviously a mountainous area, so to kind of basically what's happening is that crops can grow further and further up the mountains, but also insects can get further and further up the mountains. And so it's seeing how they're experimenting with different crops that can grow at different altitudes, and creating these wonderful kind of intercropping systems and layer farming systems where you can grow coffee and bananas and root crops all in the same plot of land, and they all kind of work with each other in a really symbiotic way to kind of benefit. And so those are the adaptations which are really kind of exciting me, and I think are really great. And then there's loads of examples. I can't think of them all off the top of my head, but the ones for me though that really are great are the ones which are kind of working with nature and not trying to deny nature, and not trying to kind of use adaptation as a way to mask there being a problem. And I think that's where people get really frustrated with adaptation as a agenda. They think it's just something which rich people do to kind of pretend that nothing's wrong, or that rich people do to protect themselves from the damage that they've caused to the world, while not really caring about anybody else, and the kind of hunkering down and adapting. I think that's where people get frustrated, but where people are doing it in a transformative way, it's really exciting.